New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. What if you had a place to return to every day for peace, clarity, and connection? The New Thought Ministry of Prayer offers live morning and evening prayer, along with a growing library you can access anytime. This is a space for reflection, renewal, and real spiritual practice, rooted in the understanding that something greater is already alive within you. You are welcome here. Join us live or watch anytime. The New Thought Ministry of Prayer, part of the New Thought Media Network. Come, take a moment for what matters most.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Inclusive Church. My name is Dr. Tracy Brown, and I am so delighted to spend some time with you today. Some short time with you today, 30 minutes or less. And the theme for today is about what happens when we as leaders in spiritual communities ignore our responsibility to respond or to address issues and opportunities. So let's back up just a little bit, and just in case this is your first time hanging out with us here on the Inclusive Church, two reminders I always try to remember, and those of you who've been with me on a regular basis, you could probably say them as well as I do. Number one, I use the word church for Inclusive Church deliberately. A lot of times in New Thought, we don't use that term because we have some old archaic ideas about it, or we have been wounded by the church and we haven't healed our woundedness. And so since the pandemic especially, we've been able to remember, recognize, and accept that the church is not a building. The church is a collective of people who are coming together to study, explore, practice, and share some common spiritual grounding or spiritual beliefs. So I deliberately use the word church. And second, today especially, I'm going to be using the word leader or leaders in our churches a lot. And so when I'm saying leader or leaders, I just want to remind you that I am not limiting the definition of leader to ministers, that all of us who are involved in creating, building, sustaining, and growing a thriving church are leaders. If we're leading a ministry team, or if we're serving on the board of directors, or if we are participating in developing strategic initiatives, or if we're teaching a class or doing prayer for people, we are, and many other roles, we are the leaders that I'm talking about, whose responsibility it is to be inclusive. So if you are on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube, please feel free to use the comments or the chat simply to say hello and let us know where you're dialing in from, as Wayne has done and is doing. And throughout our time together today, if you have any comments or examples of when you have observed what I'm talking about or when you have done what I'm talking about, then feel free to use the chat to add in your comments and your questions at any time. So today's theme is ignoring responsibility. And where did that stem from, or what am I talking about? So in the book Stained Glass Spirit, there is a chapter that is titled, Oops, I didn't mean to offend. And it's in the section that is titled Multicultural is Sometimes Messy, right? And so this chapter, Oops, I didn't mean to offend, really gets us into recognizing where that fear about offending comes from. And there are a number of sections in this chapter. And there is a paragraph I'm going to read. What especially concerns me when leaders within spiritual communities find themselves in situations where they have offended others and there is a cultural element involved. What concerns me are three things. One, ignorance, not in a pejorative way, that just people don't know what they don't know, or they're ignorant about what is a norm or an expectation in a culture different from their own. Number two, immobilization, that leaders get stuck because, or immobilized because they're so afraid to offend that then they spend more energy trying to protect themselves from making a mistake instead of taking action or actions that would help them learn more about being effective with people who represent different cultural norms and needs. And then the number three concern is ignoring responsibility. And that's the one that I want to focus on today. And I'm pretty much going to read from the book, Read and Chat, Read and Chat, Read and Talk, because I recently was in a conversation with several people, and I was just shocked that this group of leaders who have a lot of influence and a lot of responsibility in their church, um, yeah, they were ignoring their responsibility to model and to be examples for moving toward the goal and the intention. So, just in case you do have the book, on page 32 at the bottom, this subsection, Ignoring Responsibility, begins, and it reads like this. In New Thought spiritual circles, there is a big focus on personal responsibility for creating a life that works and a life you love. Yet I am shocked at how often spiritual leaders fail to take responsibility for comments they make or actions that they take that reflect insensitivity toward a group or ignorance of their impact on people from identity groups different from their own. I promise, and this is actually in the book, and it's also true right now. I promise I am not about to go on a rant here. I promise I am grounded right now in sharing this only to explain a pattern we all want to avoid. A very common phrase used in corporate training and in community organizing is this phrase: intent does not equal impact. Repeating, intent does not always equal impact. And that phrase basically reminds us that just because our intent was positive, it is less important than the negative impact that occurred. So we are also responsible for the impact. And as leaders, we need to be really paying attention to that. Going back to the book. When we are teaching spiritual principles, we often tell our students that spiritual law is always working, whether we are aware of it or not. Ignorance of the law does not keep it from working. In the context of diversity and inclusion, ignorance of the offensive nature of a word we use or of an action we take does not make it any less offensive. Whether something is offensive or not is based on the eye or the experience of the receiving person or group. Okay, end quote for now. So this idea of intent does not always equal impact is true, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you can defend yourself based on intent. What it means is that it is really important for you to respond to the impact and learn from it. And so, right, if you're going to respond to what the person or group experienced from what you said or did, you are taking responsibility for the impact. Now, I know that sometimes we push somebody's buttons and we didn't install the buttons they did. So I'm not saying that you don't hold people accountable for their own interpretation of things or their own story in their life and how they're bringing that forward. What I'm saying here is that if I am a leader, I'm going to be first listening for what did I do or say, and how was it received? How was it experienced by someone else? And I am going to be especially alert if the person is having a negative or confusing reaction to what I've said or done, and they are a member of an identity group that is very different from mine. For example, I recently facilitated a workshop, and the people in the workshop were from many different ethnic groups, a really wide age range, people from different parts of the, I was going to say of the country, but there were people from different countries participating in this workshop. So it wasn't even within one country. And so I explained something and and there were questions. It's not even so much that it wasn't well received. There was some confusion. And there was a part of me that was like, I explained it in a really basic way. It's really like the problem is your problem that you didn't understand it. So there was that human part of my brain and my ego that was a little irritated. But because I've been doing this work for so long, and because I did know that this group had a lot of different cultural identities happening within it, I asked questions and I could see where the misunderstanding was happening. And it was around an example that I used that didn't make sense outside of my experience. It made sense to a lot of people, but there were probably about, I don't know, maybe six or seven people that it was confusing to. I am the one responsible. And you might say, well, yeah, you were presenting, Tracy, you were facilitating, you're responsible. But all of us as leaders, if I am the leader of the hospitality team at my church, it's my responsibility to make sure that the understanding is there. It's not the team members' total responsibility to understand me, right? I have the information, or I have the policy, or I have the instructions, and it's my job to make sure they understand it and are able to behave in alignment with it. So if there is something that is based on gender or age, generation, that gets us more often than we realize, then it's our job to take responsibility to build a bridge for effective communication to occur. So, as I said, with generations, what was I doing? Oh, I remember the example, but I was trying to remember the context. So a few years ago, um, I was coordinating a series of weekly messages, and there was a team that had 10 of us, and we were distributing, we were writing, creating, recording, delivering a message every week. And one of the people in the group was and is still significantly younger than I am. And they used a phrase that, they were going to base their talk around. And I was like, I don't get it. I, I don't get it. What does that mean? What does that mean in general? And what does that mean in a spiritual context? And they explained what it meant, kind of, but they knew what it meant, right? It was something that their generation used, and they really kind of explained it using the same words. And so I didn't get it. I asked a question. I still didn't get it. And then I was like, okay, let me give you some examples of what I think it might mean. And you tell me if I'm on track or not. The first example I gave, I was so not on track from their perspective. I'm like, okay, so it doesn't mean that. Let me try this example. And on the second one was closer, but not really good. And the third example aligned. But I could have just said, no, we're not, no, you can't use that phrase or that topic or that theme or that title because I don't know what it means, or because people in my age group won't know what it means, or because it doesn't make sense to me. But as a leader, it was my responsibility to build the bridge. Now, in this case, I was able to do that. We were able to do that together, but it would not have happened if I didn't take responsibility as the leader of the team to go beyond my comfort zone and to go beyond what I knew or even understood after it was explained. And that may sound like, oh, I don't have time to do all of that. Like, we've got too much to get done. But when I reflect back, that was a 5-minute conversation. It felt like it was 25 or 30 minutes because it was hard for me, but it really was probably 5 minutes or less, including coming up with some different examples until I really understood it. And when that presentation was actually delivered a few weeks later, it was fabulous. So we as leaders have to get beyond our comfort zone and beyond what we are familiar with and what we know in order to do right by our audience, as Wayne is saying, but also, in addition to that, to do right by ourselves, because the world is always changing and growing. And every time I meet people who have a different background than I do, or who process information differently than I do, I'm getting the opportunity to engage with another expression of God, of Spirit itself. And so I know that the world is bigger than me. I know that the Creator has created over 8 billion people, and each one is unique, and that the groups of unique people form or are part of many different kinds of identity groups. And so, how am I going to even know, understand, or recognize more about people who are different from me if I don't engage with them? If I don't take the responsibility to learn from them and not learn as a right and wrong, but learn as an expansion of my own understanding of multiplicity, of the multiple ways that Spirit expresses. Now, if you've joined in since the beginning of the call and you want to say hi, then please feel free to do that, as Marjorie has done. So good to see you, or I guess be with you. You can see me, but I can't see you, but I know you're there. So, and again, feel free to use the chat or the comment section if you want to add a comment or an example, or if you have a question. So I'm reading in the chapter from Stained Glass Spirit, the book, Becoming a Spiritual Community Where Oneness Does Not Require Sameness, from the section, Oops, I Didn't Mean to Offend, and especially the part that one of the concerns that I have is people who are leaders ignoring their responsibility to make the change. Lenora reminds us older folks often say, well, you young folks won't understand this. But then they make a reference to something that's offensive too, because we should not assume they understand or don't understand, right? We don't know the actual experiences that people have had. And if we're the leaders, we're setting an example. What I love about this, Lenora, is what I love about the example, but I don't love when it happens, is this piece of you're not going to understand this, and then make a reference to something. Like, I'm dismissing you. Even though I know you're in my audience, even though I know you're in my class, even though I know you're in the sanctuary today while I'm giving this talk, for the next minute, I'm just going to dismiss the fact that you are here because you're not going to understand this. But I'm going to say it anyway, because what I want to say is more important than you understanding it, right? That whole subtle, unintentional exclusion by what we do and say, even though we may be the nicest, most well-meaning person in the in our imagination in the world. And we shouldn't assume that they will or will not understand. We need to do the work when we're preparing, if we're speaking or leading a class or doing anything where we're interacting, right? We're leading a meeting, then we have to do our work to think through the examples we're going to use. What words or phrases do we need to define to make sure everyone is on the same page or is having a shared experience? And we also need to be prepared that someone may say to us, I didn't understand that example. But that's up to them, or it's up to us to make our most important points 2 or 3 different ways, because sometimes it's not age, sometimes it is learning or processing or communication style that will make us give a different image for the point that we're going to make. Even though we're saying it verbally, we're describing an image. And then for someone else, we might say, imagine you were writing this down, because we know we have people in our meeting who are kinesthetic, and who like need the example or the picture of actually doing something. So age is a big place where we kind of mess up or miss, but it's not just age. And Marjorie adds this question: are leaders of an inclusive church responsible to engage with members who are coming from worldviews different from their own understanding in terms of a desire to welcome diversity? So I would I would tweak this a little bit. So the purpose of inclusion is to, right, make sure that you are including as many people as possible in experiencing the mission of your church, right? Whatever the teachings are that you are teaching, and whatever the religion or denomination or spiritual tenets are that are the mission of your church. So it is not about being a leader. An inclusive leader is not about saying everybody can believe and do everything they want, and we just want everybody who's different in any and every way. We welcome the diversity of human expression, but we have a mission. So if a church is committed to and is, well, let's use an easy example. If I am a leader at a church that is a member community of Centers for Spiritual Living, our mission is to teach and practice science of mind. So people who have different worldviews and different experiences that are cultural, I do want to be able to teach science of mind to all people. That's not the same as saying, I am here to teach, accept, and promote philosophical or religious views that are not science of mind. So that's the easy example because, right, my home community is a CSL member community committed to teaching and practicing science of mind. But if my home community were a unity church, then I would be saying, in the context of what Myrtle and Ernest Fillmore established as the foundation, that my unity church is committed to teaching people to understand and practice unity principles. Now, we do that. I'm going to just add one more little piece. We do that in the context of, right, all in New Thought, we teach all paths lead to God, or in Science of Mind, we teach all paths lead to God. In New Thought, we honor and recognize that there are many different ways to get to the one spiritual truth, but that's not the same as saying that that is the responsibility to teach all of that. So what I love, Marjorie, about your wording is, are leaders responsible to engage with members who are coming from worldviews different from their own? Yes, but not necessarily to agree or disagree. The goal is still to teach whatever that denomination or whatever that church is teaching, recognizing and respecting the context of other views. So this is a great question, and I hope I remember to go back and pull it out of the chat, because I think I want to write something about this. So I said I was going to go for 30-ish minutes, and after the introduction stuff, that gives me about 3 or 4 more minutes to go. So what else did Tracy Brown have to say about ignoring responsibility in the book Stained Glass Spirit? So near the bottom of page 33, in the context of diversity and inclusion, ignorance of the offensive nature of a word we use or an action we take does not make it any less offensive. Whether something is offensive or not is based on the eye or the experience of the receiving party or group. Typically, if someone actually lets you know you have said or done something that was offensive, it's probably someone you have either an ongoing relationship with, or they are a member of a key stakeholder group in your church. So failing to take ownership for your role in the conflict or misunderstanding is equivalent to telling them they don't matter to you. For example, this is not the time to be defensive, and it is also not appropriate to tell them, well, it's their problem, or they must have attracted this misunderstanding or this confusion, or, well, they must have a chip on their shoulder if that set them off. You didn't really mean anything by it. Like, it's your problem. Or they need to go and do their spiritual work so they won't be offended in the future when people say or do things with good intent. Yes, I'm rolling my eyes, but I'm not going to go on a rant. I'm just going to read how this chapter closes. While all 4 of these things might be revealed as triggers that are holding a client or a person back from their desired goals in the context of some spiritual coaching or counseling environment, when someone is giving you feedback about your behavior, you don't get to let yourself off the hook as if you are a superior spiritual being who never does anything that has a negative impact on others. In the realm of human interaction, we most effectively use our spiritual tools to support us as we navigate through the challenge or through the conflict we find ourselves in. We don't use our spiritual tools to ignore our responsibility to learn, to lead, or to love. So I'm hoping that there was something here that you are like gonna think about, like, when I'm in a leadership role, what is it that I could be doing? And really pay attention to when you get defensive instead of curious about how you can build a bridge. And I think we can discuss this topic again, Lenora. Thanks for that. And perhaps lay members might have something to offer in the way of evolving the teaching itself. The process of teaching, yes, and the process of reaching people, yes. And Marjorie, you have heard me say this before. If the philosophy is teaching universal spiritual principles that are absolute, those are not changeable. They're absolute. They are the universal principle. And as we apply that principle in today's world, the application of that principle is definitely going to require some changes because the world is different now than it was 3,000 years ago in Egypt or 500 years ago in the UK or 50 or 100 years ago in North America. So what we are doing is we are evolving the application, or we are evolving how we teach, but the teaching itself, meaning the principle, is not, there's nowhere for it to evolve. There's nowhere for it to evolve. It is universal, it is absolute. But how we engage with it, how we use it in the world we live in, absolutely is what we need to learn from each other and practice with each other. So, yes, Deanne, I'm so glad that you're with me today, and use it if it is helpful for you. And everybody else, use whatever is helpful for you. Think about how any of this applies to you. And for the next few weeks, I'll be turning to specific excerpts from the book Stained Glass Spirit so that we can all help to build churches where oneness does not require sameness. That is our shared goal. I will see you again next Tuesday or on a future Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, right here on the New Thought Media Network. Bye for now.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.